now. Now traditionally, a scouting or reconnaissance type of vehicle, it tends to be small. The smaller you are, the harder you are for the enemy to see, and the smaller you are, of course, the harder it is for the enemy to hit you as a target. They also tend to be fast. The quicker you are on the battlefield, that's a defence in itself. Speed can act like a defence, because as European countries bought it and used it, the Belgian army actually gave us this one. And you can see there that at the moment the driver's driving around with his head out the front of the vehicle. If he comes under attack at all, he has a lever on the side of his seat. He pulls the lever up and his seat drops down so he can close his hatch above him. And he looks out of what are glass periscopes in front of him going around, but a very different role again. This vehicle that's coming on now, this is what the military call an APC, or an armoured personnel carrier. And the whole idea of this vehicle is to carry soldiers forward into battle to where the fighting's going on. So the army sometimes call these battle taxis. It's for taking infantry into the attack. Now, if you've seen our First World War trench display inside the museum, those first tanks designed for the British Army way back in 1916, when they first go into action, September 1916, what they really are is a whopping great big mobile battering ram. They were there to cross the battlefield, to crush down the barbed wire, and let our infantry, who followed on behind at marching pace, get in the German trenches without getting held up and massacred. Now, by the Second World War, tanks are doing many more things on the battlefield, not just being battering rams. They're much faster at what they do as well. And that's when countries start designing vehicles to put soldiers in the back of to keep up with the tanks. And if you've watched all your war movies, things like the Germans and the Americans had half-track vehicles in World War II. Now, by the time this vehicle was made in the 1960s, pretty much every army in the world that built a tank had an armoured personnel carrier like this. A box on tracks, put the soldiers in the back, carry them forward into action. Now, on this particular vehicle, we've actually got some volunteers in the back. They're going to stand up now and give you a wave. They are people just like yourself, but earlier on in the display, here this morning, we grabbed them out of the audience, we've given them a helmet, given them a uniform and a gun, and a bit later in our display, they're going to show you how a vehicle like this might be used in a combat situation. Now again, at the moment, you can see all the hatches are open on this vehicle. It's called an F, or a logistics vehicle of some sort. If you can imagine your tanks have gone across a battlefield, which may be chewed up by shell fire, may still have fire coming down on it, your normal beefy trucks that we all know the army has with their nice big wheels and everything, they may not be able to get to where the tanks have got to resupply them. And tanks need an awful lot of supplies to keep them going. There's all the things that you can imagine, like ammunition for fighting the next day, food for the troops inside, fuel. One lap of this arena for one of our bigger main battle tanks is a gallon of fuel. So you're going to need an awful lot of fuel to keep those tanks going. And that's why you need vehicles like this. This particular vehicle, we might call it a supply vehicle, the Army call them logistics vehicles. It's really a tracked for transit. It's there from the far corner of our arena throughout the rest of the afternoon till about 4:15. Health and safety again, I'm afraid you've got to be over 1 metre tall to have a go in it. But it does give you a bit of a flavour of what a tracked vehicle feels like being inside. Flatbed in the rear, piled up with supplies, so you can bring them forward that way. Drivers in the front. It's a good example actually, looking how a tracked vehicle works here. We all see now, proper tank at last coming on. This tank that's coming on now takes us back to the era we call the Cold War. That was a time when all the Western, the capitalist countries, mainly led by America or the NATO countries, we thought we might be going to war with the Eastern Bloc countries, led by Communist Russia. And we knew the Russians had thousands and thousands of tanks. And we knew we would never match them, number for number, tank for tank. So in the West, we decided to go for a technologically advanced tank, using our industrial and our technological abilities to make a better quality tank. And that's the thinking that goes behind this tank, the British Army's Chieftain tank of the 1960s. Design team that put the Chieftain together, they had fought in the Second World War, and at the end of World War II the British Army said we are never going to war again with a tank that is outclassed by the enemy. We were fed up of being knocked around by those bigger German tanks like the Tiger, the Panther and the King Tiger, and you could see that thinking's influenced this tank. When it came into service at the end of the 1960s, this was by far the biggest, most powerful tank in the world. It's got a whopping great big gun on it. This is what they call a 120mm high velocity gun. What does that mean? 120mm, the size of the hole at the end of the barrel. High velocity, the rounds come out with a tremendous amount of force behind them, and it was designed specifically for knocking out enemy tanks. They knew they were going to have to knock out probably half a dozen, up to 10 tanks before they could afford to lose the Chieftain. So it had to be that much better and not.
Chose casse au mur.
Now, as part of your training in a Chieftain, you were actually locked inside that vehicle as what they call the NBC, Nuclear, Biological and Chemical Warfare Training. You were locked in the tank for 72 hours on the trot. Now, if you can imagine 4 members of your family or 4 friends you're here with today, smallest room in your house, lock the door, 72 hours, and that means eating, sleeping, drinking, all your bodily functions in full view of each other. So there's nowhere in a tank you can have an argument and go stalking off to your bedroom. No secrets at all between a tank crew. So that training of getting on with each other and knowing your job in that vehicle, very important. And of course that's what still goes on down here at Bovington to this day. Up on the camp there, just up the hill, that's where they learn how to drive the vehicles, how to maintain them, how to operate the radios. In the other direction, down at Lulworth, that's the ranges, that's where they learn how to fire the weapon systems that are on the vehicles. And it's not just tanks here at Bovington now, you see lots of different types of vehicles driving around that they do all the training here now these days. Right, out to capture the mouse. Where are they? You must have seen one panto. Come on, where? Right, here they are, the bad guys, okay? These are the Ruritanians. Now, like many countries nowadays, the Ruritanians, they don't build their own tanks, they buy them from someone else. And this one is a really good tank. This is the tank the Germans made after World War II. When the Germans were allowed to make a tank again, they said, no, we're not going to build a whopping great big tank like the Tiger, really big and heavy. We're going to build a fast tank, a really mobile tank. And they got a really good gun, the 105mm gun we had on our tanks in Britain, we sold it to them, and this is what they made, the Leopard tank. see how mobile and quick that Leopard tank is. So lots of countries all around the world, including the Ruritanians, they bought the Leopard and it's in service lots of places. Where the Germans were clever, over time they added more thicker armour, but they kept the mobility up. And on the turret of this tank, you can see, like many modern vehicles, they've bolted extra armour around the turret, so it's got even more protection. Right, they found their target, the mound at last. What do we think of him? Thank you, remember, he's a bad guy. Pretty ugly as well. Get on with it. Now, 105mm gun, so very powerful. And you can see that big bit on the back of the turret. That's to clean the air that's going inside. So again, if there was a chemical attack, the guys inside the tank would all be safe. Now, he's taking our flag down. We'll have to show him what we think about that as well when he takes it down. Right, he's taken his time, but the Ruritanians now, they have captured the position. So they've got the mound there, they put their flag up on the top of it. Now, let's see if you were paying attention a bit earlier on. Imagine the British Army's got to come and capture this position, it's rarely wasted. So find out as much as you can before you commit to the attack. The other thing, of course, he can do, as he's moving around, he can radio in. He can call in artillery fire to keep the enemy soldiers' heads down, keep them busy. Don't let them settle, don't let them get used to their position. Make sure that they're unsettled all the time. So you can do all that from just using your reconnaissance vehicle. Of course, normally he stays down the far end of the field, probably behind the tree line. If you ever got this close in a combat situation, something's gone wrong somewhere, but it does happen. You do bump into the enemy sometime, but the key thing is, you get the message back to the main force commander. Now, we all know the British Army is pretty busy around the world at the moment, but they've called on the Tank Museum instead to put in the attack on the Ruritanians' positions. So if we watch down the far end of the field, there's our Chieftain tank moving out, going into the attack, followed by our 432, the armoured personnel carrier with our volunteers in. And again, however many aeroplanes, however many tanks we've got, however sophisticated we get in this day and age, we still need infantry on the battlefield. They're the ones that take and hold the ground. So it's really important that they're still up there with the fighting tanks. So there they are, working their way forward, making the approach, following the information that the reconnaissance vehicle has sent back. They know there's a route round the side, up the flank. And the 432, the armoured personnel carrier, don't forget the guys, the soldiers in the back, they could have been bouncing around in that back vehicle for an awful long time. So they always try and point the vehicle when they stop at where the enemy is. So the guys jumping out the back know where they're attacking. And the chieftains come up the flank of the Ruritanian Leopards. Whoop, looks like we got a hit on the Leopard tank. And there, down the far end of the field, there's our 432 with the volunteers in, pointing, like I said, to where the enemy are. And there's our section of infantry jumping out the back, working their way forward in what the army would call a section or a pepper pot attack. The idea there being one section's run forward, nice straight line, drops down, here comes the second section dropping forward. And the idea of the straight line is not because the army thinks straight lines look nice and neat, it's so you don't run in front of your mate and get shot up the backside. Well, bloodthirsty lot, they're charging the enemy now. Bit of fitness training needed by one or two of the volunteers. And, well, what's happened to the Ruritanians? They've thrown in the towel already. They seem to have given up. We've got any... Oh, pathetic. Look at that. Ruritanians have thrown in the towel. Well done, our volunteers there. Well done. Now, it actually takes the British Army about 6 weeks when you're doing your phase 1 infantry training before you do section attacks. So our volunteers, they really didn't know what they were letting themselves in for. They've done very well to pick all that up in about 20 minutes before the display. So when they get on top of the mound there, do give them a good round of applause. And hopefully we'll see the Union flag going back up the flagpole so we can all sleep safely in our beds tonight. Well done, the volunteers there. And you can imagine all the stories they'll be telling in the pubs and the war stories tonight. Now, what we're going to do for you now, ladies and gentlemen, Mauritanians will be taken into custody, so don't worry about them. Our rides vehicle will start again in about 10 minutes from the far corner of the